Welcome to Real Estate Real World, where we talk to the movers, shakers, and leaders that are getting it done right now in the real estate industry and beyond. Your host, Marguerite Crespillo, started this podcast simply dedicated to call people about what's really happening in this crazy roller coaster ride of real estate. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and stay up to date on the newest stuff by adding yourself to the list at www.realestaterealworld.com. Now your host, Marguerite Crespillo.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Real Estate Real World. I'm Marguerite Crespillo, and I'm excited to be here. And today I'm actually excited about this guest because I interviewed him originally back in January. So we're going on almost 9 years. Crazy how time flies. And we had such a great interview then. And of course, I've followed his story all these years. He's quite an incredible man and quite an influence that he has been, not only on me and my life, but I don't know, probably millions of others right now. So let me read his quick bio because I'm excited to get him on the show and have a great conversation with him. Michael Maher, let me say it right. Today's guest is a living testament to the transformative power of connections and referrals. Hailing from a humble Kansas town, he's turned curiosity and humility into a vast network, delivering over 500 referrals annually. I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg. A remarkable feat in his field. This success catapulted his company into the millions and birthed his best-selling book, The 7 Levels of Communication: Go from Relationships to Referrals, which is available on Amazon. Top bestseller in 7 days, remains one of the top sellers for over 11 years. His book sparked the Generosity Generation, a global referral community, and his company, Referco, is the undisputed authority on business referrals. Michael's clientele boasts presidents and billionaires. He's graced stages with luminaries like George Bush, Tony Robbins, Barbara Corcoran, and Magic Johnson. Today, he's here to unravel the immense power of referrals and guide you in building businesses that provide for your family and feed your soul. A master who practices what he preaches. He's not just a guest, he's a trusted friend and colleague. So welcome, my friend Michael.
Thank you so much, Marguerite. I appreciate that. And man, I couldn't believe it that it had been 9 years since our last interview. We need to have public conversations more often, obviously.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I know. I was surprised too, because I was looking back. I was like, when was that? And I was looking back through my podcast, and I started my podcast in 2013, I think. And what's funny is I was re-listening to the show yesterday to refresh our conversation. And back then we did the podcast on freeconferencecall.com.
Oh, yes. I
And it
remember
was
that.
a
You had to be
phone
one of the
conference.
first podcasts.
Yeah, and we didn't even have, I think shortly thereafter, I started using Skype and then Zoom. And of course, now StreamYard, we have much more advanced technology. But it was a great interview back then. And what I was amused by a little bit, and we talked a tiny bit about this before the show, how you flipped the script on me. It ended up being you interviewing me a bit more in the episode. And the crazy part is that day, we had been talking about it for a while, my husband and I, and we had a large brokerage of 120 agents, and it was getting just too much financially, emotionally, everything. It was too much. And we had been back and forth and had gone through the decision, the heartbreaking, difficult decision of closing that brokerage. And so that morning, I was preparing for doing that in the afternoon when I had your interview, and I didn't want to reschedule it because I was looking forward to our conversation. And so that afternoon, I went in and shut down the company. And I remember you asking me in the interview, what are my goals? What do I want to do? And 3 things came up. Number 1 was to write my book, which I ended up writing my book, 100 Things I Love About You, which is not at all the book I talked about in our conversation, because I had talked about writing a real estate book. So it was funny that I actually accomplished that goal. My book is now also available on Amazon and online. And I had talked about doing more coaching and training, which I've done a lot more in that direction. And I talked about our trip to Spain. My husband and I went on an anniversary trip. It was our 24th anniversary. So we're coming up on our 33rd. And it was our first trip we had gone on with no kids and no friends. And I remember you sent me a book. So I got a couple days in the mail, true to your word in the conversation. I got uh, the book for Spain in the mail. So you definitely had a much bigger impact than you probably realized at the time. So thank you and welcome.
I appreciate that. And I'm a believer in that. When you have that conversation, you're looking for action items, you're looking for ways to take the relationship to the next level. And sometimes that can be something as simple as a handwritten note that they get 2 or 3 days later that tends to blow people away. Even better is the gift that's super applicable to the conversation you had and just takes the relationship to the next level. And I wanted you to truly enjoy Spain. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in the planning that we forget where we're going. We forget the awesomeness of different things that we're going. And we also, when we go overseas, we really need to focus on, let's make sure we see everything we want to see because we might not go back for a while. So I hope your trip went fantastic.
It was a trip of a lifetime. My husband and I laughed because we're like, we're either going to come back divorced or we're going to come back more in love, one of the two. And luckily, we're still together. So there you go. We did figure out that so the trip was 15 days, and we figured out 13 days was probably about the max to be together. So the last couple days got a little wonky, but we did have an amazing time. And I'm forever grateful that we were able to take that trip. So thank you for sending me that book. So my big question to you really is like, how did you even end up in this referral arena, so to speak? I'm not sure that's the right language, but
Yeah.
what was your path to getting to where you did, and how did you come about writing the book? And you've definitely led by example. So where did that originally come from, that thought or that concept? Is that something you grew up with? Did you learn it? Did you hear it from someone?
So I think it's the accumulation of certain things. So first of all, when I got into real estate, I was taught just like everybody else. So do the cold calls, do the door knocks, do the emails. At the time were just a thing, is just mass emails. And I started doing like the cold calling. And at that very same time, the do not call list was coming out, and everybody signed up for the do not call list. Like everybody across the nation signed up for it. I was just worried that, man, I'm going to call the wrong stranger at the wrong time, and this is going to become a problem. And then it's like, all right, how big of a problem? Then I discovered that the fine for calling the wrong do not call person is a $10,000 fine. So it was just like, all right, I don't want to be a criminal and I don't want to be fined. So I'm not going to go down that route. And then, so door knocking, right? And I went door knocking, and I remember going to a couple of doors, and every door had a sign on it and it said, no soliciting. And I didn't even know what that meant. I thought that meant don't spit your gum out on the sidewalk or something. I didn't even know. And this is serious. I did not know what soliciting even was. But I remember seeing it, and I'd knock and they're like, "Can't you see the sign, no soliciting?" I was like, I'm not even chewing gum. It's okay. And I got to the fifth door in Nottingham Downs. It's a subdivision in Overland Park, Kansas. And it was a top producer from Kansas City, top producing realtor. And she basically read me the riot act, cussed me up a storm, and said, "Don't ever effing come back to my effing neighborhood." And I took her advice. I never went back door knocking ever again, and I never went back to her neighborhood. It was interesting. And I come to find out later that solicitation is a crime too. And I didn't want to be a solicitor. I didn't want to be a criminal. So then they're like, all right, go email people. And then I kept getting all these responses. The open rate was tremendous. Everybody opened it. And then they all responded, don't ever email me again, you spammer. So I got to learn a new word, spammer. And it was like, I don't think spammer is a compliment. So it was like solicitor, spammer, criminal, or I could go into this other side of the world that is relationships and referrals. And it made me go back to answer the second part of your question is it also from some upbringing? My dad was a teacher. He made $2,500 a year. My mom stayed home with 5 kids. We lived in very poor housing. We had food stamps for money. And I remember that when I was 12 years old, my baseball team qualified for a trip to Colorado to play baseball. We were doing a fundraiser. I didn't care. Like, I didn't know we were that poor. I didn't know any of this. And
Right.
but I knew the winner who sold the most candy bars would get a brand new BMX bike, red, be it like a creme de la creme BMX bike. We were too poor for me to have a bike. I didn't have a bike. I always ran alongside the kids who had the bikes, and we'd go play baseball or basketball or whatever it was. I told my dad that I want to win this bike. I want to sell a lot of candy bars. I had no sales skills. My dad had no sales skills, but he goes, Marianne, which is my mom's name, Marianne, go get the Christmas card list. So what we did is we made a list of the people who are most likely to buy from us. And on a legal pad of paper, we just started writing names and we wrote all the Christmas card list, and then we wrote my dad's contacts and my mom's contacts, and we just wrote it down. My very first person on the list was the superintendent of schools. And my dad took me up to the office, the main office of the school district, and just got an appointment with Gary. And he made me go in and tell him what I was doing. And I don't remember what I said. It could not have been good. But it was basically, I really want to win this bike. To win this bike, I need to sell candy bars. And I'm hoping that you would want some candy bars. They're basically little candy bars. We're charging like $3 for. It was the worst deal ever in the history of candy bars.
Of
He
course.
he bought a box. He bought a box
Well,
right
Bob.
there. So a whole box, like not just one. He bought a box, and then he goes, Nancy, who was his secretary receptionist. Honestly, Nancy ran the whole school district, in my opinion. But so he goes, Nancy, come in here. He goes, Nancy, you meet with that women's club down at the community center every once in a while. When do you guys meet next? And she goes, we meet tomorrow night. And she goes, do you think that you could have Michael go down and say something at your group and maybe spread the word about this? And she goes, oh, we'd love to. That would be fantastic. Have the little guy come down. And so my dad took me to the community center the next night. I sold 20 cases a box of candy bars that night to 55 women. And that was the very first person on the list. I did not know them at all. And my dad knew him, but he's one of 200 teachers in the district. But it like that. And then we went down the Christmas card list as far as we could go in the time allowed. I'm just telling you. And then we got to where we had the final banquet where we were celebrating that we were going to go to Durango, Colorado for this all-star tournament, and they did the announcements on the candy bars. They didn't say numbers or anything like that. They just said, all right, third place for whatever it was, like a frisbee or something, was Jeff Whipperman. And as soon as they said Jeff Whipperman, I was like, oh my God, there's no way I won. He's the newspaper owner son. Like, he knows everybody. Like, he's a super popular kid. So he got third. And then he said David Curry sold the second amount of candy bars. And I was like, he is the owner of the bank in town, son. They just used all the money in the bank to buy all these candy bars, and there's no way that I was going to beat him. And he actually got something nice for second. I don't remember what it was. And then Marguerite, I'm telling you, I'm getting chills telling the story right now. I haven't told this story in years, but
Wow.
I then they go, and the winner of the BMX bike, and I swear to God, like there was no way I was winning this. And they said, is Michael Maher. And
Wow.
I let out a yell, yeah, and walked up, and I literally rode that bike the like 3 miles home with my dad follow. I literally, and then I didn't get off that bike for years, like 2 or 3 years. It was just so the combination is there's a lot of ways that didn't work for me. And then
Yeah.
there is a way to work, which was relationships and referrals. And then how did I get? I made a list of the people who are most likely to buy or most likely to be in relationship with me. And That's where our grading the database comes from, and so on and so forth. That's it in a combinatorial nutshell, if you will.
What a great story. There's another, do you know what Jeb Blount, who wrote the book Fanatical Prospecting?
Yeah, so I don't know him personally, but I know the book, yes.
Yeah, so he tells a story of something very similar in school where he had to sell something or whatever, but his was because there was like a cute girl in the school and he wanted to impress her. So he ended up, I think it was a yearbook advertising or something like that, right?
Yeah.
He ended up selling like a crazy amount of yearbook advertising so he could impress a girl.
Oh, the things I've
The
done to
BMX.
impress. So I can definitely relate to his story too.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think that so many of us entrepreneurs and people have some sort of story that drove us to get where we are. Like I was always an entrepreneur. I remember being 11 years old and I grew up in Chico and we had the walnut trees and you could get the 50-pound gunny sack bags. And if you filled them up and took them to, it was what, Blue Diamond Nuts or whatever it was back in the day, they would give you $5 for, because we would just walk around on the streets and pick them up on neighbors' front yards. And I remember I quickly figured out that it was a lot more fun collecting the money than picking up the nuts. And so I started paying my little brothers $2.50 to fill the bag. So I was an early entrepreneur. But I definitely have similar referral stories in my real estate business. And so, how did that lead you to, what were the results of that in your real estate business? Like
Yeah.
learning how to generate, to go from not cold calling, which
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that like loves, there's some freaks of nature that love to
Yeah.
call cold call, but I don't love it. I never did. And I've never built my business around it. So I really resonated with your story on cold calling. Where did it go from there?
I was doing real estate in the summer. I was actually a teacher and a coach, kind of following my dad's path at the time. And I got my real estate license because I wanted to learn how to invest in real estate and kind of the road to wealth. As that you get your real estate license, you learn nothing about investing in real estate.
Nothing,
And
nothing about
so
real estate overall.
yeah, truly. Chattel and 43,560. So
That's the one thing I remember. That's so funny.
So what's interesting is so I was just basically looking for a summer job and I decided I'd do real estate. What I did mostly in summer was I played semi-pro softball. I played 300 games a year. So if a client was going to happen, it was probably going to happen at a softball park or from a softball team. That's what happened. One of my teammates ended up was looking for their very first home. And super long story short, I just remember showing properties, hoping to God they would not want to make an offer, which is not a good way to be a real estate agent. I was going to be revealed as a fraud. I didn't know how to write an offer. I didn't know anything about the paperwork. I didn't know anything about anything. So I talked them out of all these houses and they thought I was like just looking out after them. And I was really just looking out after myself. And
That's
I
funny.
ended up going into a new home subdivision. And the lady, after we went through, I was just like, oh God, they're buying here. Like the smell of new wood, and they were putting their furniture in the room and like mentally going through, like they were visualizing living. And I just knew that the gig is up. I'm going to be revealed right here. We get to the front model home again. And the lady was like, what'd you think? And Vanessa was like, oh my God, like this is, we really love the third model. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be so bad. And then the lady behind the desk goes, do you want me to write it up? And I go, yes, I do want you to write that up. And I want you to know I'm going to read every single paragraph, every single line in that because I wanted to learn it. And so she wrote it up and I got it checked out. I checked it out with the broker. I got an EBA, exclusive buyer's agreement, like the day before closing. Just the worst agent in the history of the world, other than they got a phenomenal home, brand new, in a great school district and made a lot of money on it in about 5 years after that when they sold with me. But Davey and Vanessa. And so what do we do with softball players? We play softball and we party, right? Honestly, adult slow pitch softball is code word for get it with your buddies and drink. That's really all it is. Just so
So
everybody here
true.
knows. So what are we going to do? We're going to have a party at Davey's house. So I did my very first housewarming party, and I invited 20 of the neighbors
Wow.
with a Microsoft. It wasn't Photoshop, that's Adobe. It was the very first publisher, the worst
Oh yeah, I use
invitation.
Publisher. Yeah.
They were horrible, right? They were so basic, but they worked. I put 20 in the neighborhood or in the on top of the mailbox of the neighbors. And then we invited the softball friends. And you know what, Marguerite? There were probably 45 people there. I ended up getting 11 referrals, including Vanessa's parents. And Vanessa's parents ended up buying
Oh,
like a $400,000 house with me and sold their $300,000 house. And it just, so I got 11 referrals at the very first housewarming party, and I became the real estate agent who throws housewarming parties. And
wow.
it just really blossomed from there, and I was always really super busy trying to keep up for years. Honestly, for years, the systems had to catch up with the productivity. And so I had a good problem. I had more to work with than I could work. So
That's amazing. And I don't understand a lot of the real estate industry why they focus so much of their time, resources, and energy in advertising and Zillow and boards and park benches. I've never myself understood it. I learned early on, it'll be 30 years for me in December being in the real estate industry. And same thing, I learned early on that cold calling was miserable. In fact, I've told the story on other episodes where I was cold calling with a friend of mine. He was a lender. We made it about not only 15 minutes, maybe an hour in. And I'm like, this sucks. Let's go to
yeah.
the bar. So him and I left and went down the street to happy hour and ended up walking out of happy hour with clients. And I was like,
Yep.
okay, so that didn't work. This did. Then I had a Christmas party and I ended up getting a bunch of referrals out of a Christmas party. And so I've been, my big thing has been parties as well. And I'm actually finishing up my new book called How to Party Your Way to Success. But it's, that is what worked for me, and to do what you've done has been amazing. And so how did that translate into, you obviously built your real estate business around that, and you've done a lot of other stuff, but you've also written one of the best books out there, 7 Levels, which is an extraordinary book. How did you end up translating all that into your book?
I didn't quite translate all of it, but I there's really three elements to referral mastery system. It's self mastery, relationship mastery, and event mastery, which is, as you say, part of your way to success. And the gap that was missing from all, I read over 2,500 business books. There just wasn't that relationship mastery book. Like, how do I go from having relationships to getting referrals? Everybody had relationships, but they weren't getting referrals from them. And so it's relationship mastery. What is the ultimate outcome of a great relationship when it comes to business? It's referrals. And I truly believe that the purpose of your business is to be referable. If your business isn't referable, you're doing something wrong. What's wrong with your
Oh,
business if it's not
I
referable?
love that.
And then, but this goes even deeper to the self mastery element, which is I truly believe that your purpose in life is to be referable. If you're not referable, what are you doing wrong? Are you not respected, trusted? If not, then what do you got to do to become respected and trusted? What do you got to do to become referred? What do you got to do to be so good and do things so well that people are going to spread the word about you? And that's how you're making an impact. That's how that you're having an influence and making a difference is by people referring you. I think the long story short is like why I wrote it is because I didn't know I was doing anything special until Howard Britton interviewed me like this for a Star Power interview. And he interviewed me and he has 100,000 people on his list. The CD, that's how long ago that was, went out to 100,000 people and my phone blew up, my email blew up. Everybody wanted to know, how do I get these referrals? And so I'd send them the house ring party system, or I would send them the client appreciation party system that I had, or I would send them the home court advantage and the networking stack, or the 7 steps to a power note. I would send them what they wanted, but it was always like I'm giving them an answer, but I'm not giving them like the answer. So I knew I needed to write the book to just become the whole answer. to how you go from relationships to referrals. And honestly, it's still only 1/3 of the answer, but it's enough of an answer that you can do a lot of business, hundreds of transactions a year, just by implementing this. So it took me a couple years, ended up writing the book, and now it's a solution for a lot of people who want to have a referral based business.
I love what you were saying too about the self part, because I remember somebody telling me or learning somewhere along the line that your phone should only ring for two things. One of them is how to give you a compliment, and one is to refer you. And if you're getting lots of phone calls that are not that, it's a perfect time for self reflection, right? If you're getting calls that are complaints or problems or challenges or issues with a transaction or all these other things, then either the system is not working that you're currently operating under, or you're not doing things correctly. And if you take that to being, how can you as a human being become more referable in whatever that applies to, whether that's real estate or helping with selling widgets or helping with whatever, how can you as a human being become more referable? That's a lot of self reflection that not everyone wants to do, but I think it's probably the most powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And that one of the reasons that I didn't necessarily focus on a lot of that in 7L was because there are so many mindset books. There are a ton of books on mindset, attitude, character development, 7 habits of highly effective people, and so on and so forth. So I just didn't feel like there was a lack of mindset books. What I've discovered though is there is a lack of that confidence and mindset in people. And one of the things that I say all the time is we have an acronym for the self mastery pillar of our business, and that is FLY, which means first love yourself. Take care of yourself. Like, what are your rituals like? Do you have rituals around yourself, not just around your family, not just around dinners or meals, but first love yourself? What take care of yourself? And what we've discovered with it's really hard to love on others if you don't first love yourself. And
So
once you take care of yourself, it's amazing how energizing and empowering it is, and you can truly start to love on others at a super high level. Now, in our system, we've seen people get there one of two ways. Sometimes they work on it by putting together a morning ritual and a nightly ritual and a weekly ritual, and they gain confidence that way. And then they get to this cusp of they're confident enough to talk to people in a confident way. We've also come about this where people just implement event mastery and they do an event and they start seeing their value, and that raises their confidence. Is the productivity actually raises the confidence after a while, and they come to it on the back end. You see this a lot with the quote unquote gurus anymore. Is there's people selling a morning ritual and it's talk about getting up at 4:30 or 5:30, and here's the thing, that person did not become successful by getting up at 4:30 or 5:30 and having that ritual. They discovered the ritual later, and now they're telling you how excited they are about it and that you should buy this course or product. And that's okay. It's okay either way. People get there in different ways. Sometimes they get there through the ritual and implementing the rituals. Sometimes they get there by succeeding in business, and they can actually see the business taking them to a place where, oh, I have value because I can help people with real estate or I can help people with business. And honestly, I came to the character part through the competence and communication part. My communication and competence got good, and then I realized I'm good. And that so I was more of that second type of group of people.
what I find interesting too is that when you actually start to look at even the thought process and the way that it works, is I think a big part in self discovery and learning about you and in your business is taking the time to listen, right? Is, are you genuinely listening to what is going on with that person and how you can help them? Like, I take it back to our first conversation in 2015, and the fact that you turned it around and you started like listening to what was going on with me and then followed through with that. I think sometimes we listen to what's going on with people, but then we get busy and sidetracked and we don't do the follow through that really makes the impact, right? Because we get busy, things go on, or we think, oh, they won't really pay attention or they won't care. You hear it all the time, love is in the details, right? And it's in the little things that we do. It's not like you didn't send me $10,000 or anything like that. It was a book that was more impactful than anything else could have been. And I think that's where, as an industry, what I know is that this business has always been built on relationships, always. And when you talk to the average agent and you ask them, hey, where'd your last 5 deals come from? Almost always, without fail, depending on who you're talking to, those last 5 deals came from family member or somebody at church. You met them at a Starbucks, right? The kids' parents at your baseball team or whatever that is. It's so common, yet I don't quite understand why agents are still focused on all the other stuff. Do they think it's an easy button? What is that about?
I don't have the answer to you there. I don't. As all the research shows, 4 out of 5 of your first 5 transactions are going to be sphere. So
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't just jump into that and embrace it. And I think it's just because who has the system for it? Who, and even some of the best courses I've seen out there are still the hodgepodge. They're like, do open house, do these calls, do this letter, do this. And they're really not like 30 days. Let's focus on your sphere so that we can get your first transaction. And honestly, it sounds like a course I need to, that honestly.
Yeah, I'm happy to
It's a,
help. Well, happy to collaborate.
yeah, our stuff has always been more for the experienced agent to the team icon, the team leader. And what's interesting is I do know that a lot of new agents read the book, but there's also 108 strategies in the book. That's a pretty overwhelming set of strategies. Now that you've said, I'm something that we've been talking about in our leadership meetings has been this focus on a new agent avatar that go from rookie to rookie of the year. And so I think you've just helped me talk through that to the point where we're going to launch that next year and have a 30-day course that's going, it's like, how do you maximize those moments in the first 30 days for a new agent? And but the thing is it's just not lead generation. In the first 30 days, an agent needs more than lead generation. They need to learn the contracts. They need to learn MLS. They need to learn how to search. They need to, a lot of things.
It's funny that you talk about that because it's even something as this is a little comical, but it's not how to open a lockbox.
Yeah, there's
Like,
nothing like
it
not being
sounds
able to
crazy,
look, not being able to open it when you have a client with you. That's always the funnest. You're
right?
sweeping the Supra and you keep getting a red light and you're just like, I know I charged this son of a gun this morning, or the code doesn't work, or there's no key in the lockbox. That's happened, you know.
Oh yeah, I've got a million stories. I wish I would have kept track of a lot of them over the last 30 years.
There is a
But
lady that has a book that is like the funniest stories from real estate or something. And I don't remember who wrote it. I think it might have been a Bach or I can't remember, but there is a pretty good book out there that's pretty funny about her experience with real estate. And there's a lot of things. There's a lot of stories. There's a lot of things that have happened. 2,500 homes sold, and
oh,
I've seen a lot of craziness.
oh yeah, for sure. Tell me a little bit. We've only got a couple of minutes left
Yeah.
because I know you got stuff going on. But tell me, what is it you're working on now? Tell us a little bit about your podcast or what's next for you, other than the one we just talked about.
Yeah. So, well, the Referrals podcast is we're on over 310 episodes at this point. Launches
Wow.
every Tuesday morning, and it's been a lot of fun to do that. And here's the thing, it's real people sharing real stories about real referrals, like how they got referrals. And I can't wait to have you on to share your story about your friend Miss Buckhead, right? Or Buck Master.
Master.
Master, that's right. So we'll get a chance to share that network that you've got there and so on and so forth. So that's one thing I'm passionate about it because we don't have Oprah on, we don't have Tony on. We really focus on real people who have real stories about real referrals, and what it has done is it's just given a lot of people hope that they can do it too. I think that's the number one thing that I love about our courses and the Referrals podcast is people get done, they go, if that person can do it, I can do it too. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, what I want them to know is that your sphere doesn't overlap with very many people's sphere in town. In your even in your neighborhood, they don't overlap as much as you might think. So you can work your sphere without competition forever for many years. And that's the low hanging fruit. It's your sphere, it's the people that are around you. So, anyway, so that's the podcast in a nutshell. People can check it out at referralspodcast.com. Something I'm very excited about is Notevember starts today. And I was in Oregon about 10 years ago, and I it was a high level of producer. And they were just talking, and then some lady was just like, "Oh my God, look, it's coming up on November. Even the month name has no in it." And the positive person in me just literally, I don't know, I just rebelled. And I was just like, what is a better thing than November? And we got to think. And so was first thing I thought it was Yes Vember, just really didn't have a ring to it. But then I was thinking like Veterans Day is in November, Thanksgiving is in November, and it's your birthday is in November. I didn't know that at the time. Now I do. My anniversary is in November. But it was
There you
like, so it's really about thanks. It's a month of appreciation. And I just thought, Notevember, we're going to do a 30-day challenge where you write 30 notes, at least 30 notes in 30 days. We have people that write over 900 notes in a month. Yeah. So Notevember is 30 days, 30 notes. Every morning, I give you a 5-minute video and a trigger or a prompt. And the trigger or prompt is, here's who to write your note to. And I give you exactly what to write. So you take out your envelopes and your note cards, and you think about, all right, who was my number one referral source from last year? And you write a note to the number one referral source. And then you think about, and there's just a ton of prompts and the language in there. So I will tell you that we have lots of people who don't write handwritten notes all year long, and then they sign up for November. They catch up on all their notes from the previous 12 months, and they're caught up. They don't have to write any more notes during the rest of the year because they're caught up. They've written all their
I
notes in one
love
month.
this idea. So where can somebody sign up for that?
It's notevember.com.
Really,
Noteven.
even better.
Yeah, Notevember.com. And it's very inexpensive, and it can be even more inexpensive if you're in Referral Mastery Academy. We have a monthly subscription model that is an academy that they get 3 event masteries, which is me teaching you how to have events and holding your hand through having 3 events, and tons of other courses and 2 live masterminds a month, and so on and so forth. That's Referral Mastery Academy. If you're in Referral Mastery Academy, you get Notevember and March Magic and Momentum May and Summerfest for no extra cost, basically for the same as your
That's awesome.
subscription. I think Referral Mastery Academy is the biggest no-brainer in business. I think it's the best investment because of how much we do for you in that course. So that's
Well,
it.
that's amazing and exciting. So where do we'll have the links in the show notes for that. I'm
Okay.
really excited about November. I'm going to check out that because we're airing this episode on November 1st. So you'll have the entire month to do
Perfect
your
day.
notes. And if you need some guidance and help through that, you can definitely sign up is it referralmastery.com? Is that the website?
So I would just go to notevember.com, right? Yeah, when you go to November, you'll get a choice. Here's November. You can just sign up for that course, or you can check into Referral Mastery Academy and you can click and learn more about Referral Mastery Academy. If that's not for you, then just do November, and you're going to get me coaching you every day. What's 30 days of my coaching worth? I think it's quite a bit, but you don't have to pay that much. So it's a lot of fun. But I think as much fun as it is, and the best thing are the stories you get of the people who receive the notes and then call the person that's in November, and there's tears shed, and there's just so much appreciation. And this is the holidays, and like you said, there's just this reflective nature to it, and it just hits different. It hits harder. It hits better when somebody gets a handwritten note in November and December. It just does. And you got Veterans Day and you've got the birthday of the Marines. So thanking troops is a part of this as well. And then you've got Thanksgiving, which, it just, this is so much better than sending Thanksgiving cards, which I did 12 years ago. And everybody was sending Christmas cards and whatever. We were sending Thanksgiving cards just because they were different. And then I just started this, I'm going to write handwritten notes, and they were received like you can imagine, in a beautiful way. Like anybody received. I just got a couple of handwritten notes today, and it makes you warm inside, and it feels like $1 million. And it costs those people maybe $1.
I don't even think that people realize the impact. So many people don't send mail anymore because they send email or social media. And just getting a note card in the mail, you don't even know how it can impact people. And I think that it's really powerful. And I'm excited for Notevember. So thank you again for being here today. It's always a true pleasure to talk to you. And I hope it's not 9 years again before we talk. Let's make sure that doesn't happen.
And we're going to talk when we get on Referrals podcast. We're going to talk sooner than later. That's for sure.
I'm excited about that. So thank you again for joining us today. I love talking to you, and I'm always inspired by what you're working on. And so everybody, please make sure to follow Michael and on any of his social media, and be sure to head on over to Notevember. I'm anxious to see what an impact that will make. There's no doubt it will make such a huge impact. So thank you again for joining us today, Michael. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure and honor, and just really appreciate you and our relationship and the impact that you're making on this industry. I just really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today again on Real Estate Real World, where we get to talk to all the cool, amazing people. And I'm super honored to have this opportunity to talk to people that are making a huge difference, not only in our industry, but in the world. So be sure to follow us on all the favorite podcast places you can, and head on over to margueritecrespillo.com or realestaterealworld.com and add your name to our list. Thank you again for joining us today, and go out and make it an amazing day.
Thank you for joining us today on Real Estate Real World, where we talk with masters and leaders in real estate and beyond on how we can raise the bar in our industry. Please subscribe over on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to give us a review. Your reviews encourage us and help others find our podcast. For show notes and hot topics on what's going on right now in our real estate industry, hop on over to www.realestaterealworld.com and add your name to our email. Thanks again for listening. And go out there, be a part of the elite masterclass in raising the bar on the real estate industry.